All right, it is 12 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get kicked off. We have 8 attendees on so far, so thank you so much for joining us today. This is webinar number 2 out of 5 for Crested Butte's Transportation and Mobility Plan. And today we have Jim Charlier here with us, which we'll introduce with his bio in just a few minutes to talk all about slowing down and increasing safety through calmer streets. So thank you all for being here today. My name's Mel Yema. I'm the Town of Crested Butte's Long Range Planner. I'm also joined by Troy Russ, the town's Community Development Director, Nick Katmer, another planner with the town, as well as Jenna Green, another planner with the town, and we are your Transportation and Mobility Plan town staff team. This webinar is a lunch and learn style. It will be 1 hour long with a presentation by Jim, and we will be recording this presentation. So if you like what you heard, we would love for you to share the link with your friends and spread the word so they can watch it after the fact. So what are we going to cover in this hour? We're going to kick off with just a quick icebreaker question, kind of see who's here and in the room and attending today. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about what is the transportation and mobility plan and kind of what the process is to expect and ways to engage. Then I'll turn it over to Jim Charlier for his presentation, and we'll have about 25 minutes after that for a question and answer with Jim, and we'll wrap up with what's next and how to continue engaging. All right, so we'd love to start with just a quick icebreaker and make this meeting a little more interactive. So at the top of your screen, you'll see a website and a code there, mentometer.com. And if you go to that website and enter that code 89214265, we'd love to hear from you. What is your favorite street or alley in Crested Butte? We'd just love to start with this icebreaker, and this can give us an idea of kind of who's on the call today. And then if you stay on that website on your phone or in another browser throughout Jim's presentation, you'll be able to type in questions as they come up for Jim as well throughout his presentation. So it'll take just a couple minutes to start breaking the ice, and I'd love to hear your favorite street or alley in Crested Butte. All right, we have Elk Avenue, Butte Avenue. Let's see if we end up naming them all. There's 10 attendees on so far, so see if we'll get 10 different streets or some of the same ones. Red Lady, Butte Avenue Bridge, we'll give just another minute or so. Maroon Avenue, lots of folks loving Butte Avenue, so that's great. All right, we've had 6 respondents and we have 10 attendees and 4 panelists, so we'll see if we can get a few more, and then we will move on. Couple more for Maroon. All right, well, thanks for breaking the ice with us. We will go ahead and move on. And again, if you just keep your browser up with this Menti website, that will be an opportunity for you to type in questions for Jim as they come up throughout this webinar. All right, so moving on, let's talk about what is this transportation and mobility plan. So hopefully you've seen the posters around town for this webinar series where we're kicking off the plan this month. But last year, the town adopted its community compass, its new comprehensive plan. Hopefully you've heard about it by now and have read the executive summary. But that compass set forth a 5-year strategic plan for the town, which included 7 goals for the town and town council to prioritize over the next 7 years, of which one of those goals is to de-emphasize cars and focus on walking, biking, and transit. And the first strategy identified in the compass to work towards meeting this goal is to conduct a comprehensive re-examination of how people move throughout the town through a transportation master plan. So that's what this plan is all about, identifying what our challenges and opportunities are for moving around the town. So how will we do that? What will the process look like? So we're starting with a soft launch right now in this kind of January through April timeframe where we're really focused on data collection and plan preparation. So we're doing lots of data collection and analysis where we had speed trailers up all last summer. We have great data from our partners, our transit agencies, and other important partners. And we're collecting all that data right now and really analyzing it. But we're also collecting data from the community through our mobility survey, and hopefully you've taken it, and if not, we will put a link up at the end today. But that's really important data for us to understand how you move around throughout the town and how you get to town. So please take that survey. Otherwise, in this phase, we are doing these introductory webinars to bring in transportation and mobility experts to talk about best practices, case studies, and tools and things we should be thinking about as we embark on this plan. And then we will also be just spending a lot of time this phase recruiting participants to continue engaging in phase 2. And then we'll wrap up with a town council retreat on April 3rd. Our next phase in May and June is going to be all about identifying challenges and opportunities. And this will be a lot of community outreach and engagement with you all. So we're going to kick that off in early May with a community open house where we'll share all of that data that we've collected and started analyzing and talk to you all about where are the biggest challenges and where are the biggest opportunities. We're then going to host 6 half-day workshops on different topics from parking to traffic to walkability and bikeability to urban design, and bring together diverse viewpoints to really work through what are our biggest opportunities and some solutions for these topics. From those workshops, we're going to recruit an advisory committee to really kind of hold us accountable as we draft the plan to all the work done in those workshops with the community. And then we will end that phase with another town council retreat as well. And then later in the summer and fall, we will go into drafting the plan. So we'll prepare that plan, we'll review it with the advisory committee, we'll review it and get feedback from the community and have multiple presentations with our town council and partners to really spend time refining that plan to ensure our community has buy-in to it. So that is the transportation and mobility plan. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, Jim Charlier. We are so excited to have him on the call today, and thank you all for joining us, for wanting to hear from Jim. So Jim is an expert in sustainable transportation and a community planner with successful built projects throughout the U.S. He's known for innovations in multimodal, community-based transportation planning and in safety-based corridor and facility design. He helped pioneer the practice of linking land use directly to transportation in a strategic framework driven by community objectives. His local transportation master plans have served as national prototypes for addressing economic vitality, quality of life, public health, and sustainability. So thank you so much for being here, Jim, and I'm going to unshare my screen and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. And so I have to, all right. So thank you very much. It's fun. Crested Butte's one of my favorite towns. I started working up there.
Wait,
and then
Jim, I'm sorry. I'm not sure I'm seeing your screen.
Okay, it's showing here. Sorry.
No worries. This always happens with Zoom.
I'll try it again.
Oh, there.
Does that do something good?
We're seeing your screen, but it's just showing the Zoom browser.
Okay. And so you're still not seeing it?
We see your screen, but it just has like your internet browser up from when you logged into Zoom.
You just picked the wrong window, Jim. Try it again and you'll see your PowerPoint window and click on that.
Yeah, I have it. The PowerPoint's up on this screen. I'll close it again and try it again. That didn't work?
No, still not.
No,
seeing
try
it.
to unshare and then reshare, but you have to watch which window you select. It'll allow you to select a specific app that's running on your computer.
The only, I'm sorry for this. The only thing it shows me, All right, let me try share. And then click this. How's that?
Still just the web browser.
Yeah, if you try clicking Xing out of the web browser.
All right. Okay, let me do that. And now this. Still no.
Try hitting the share screen button again.
Not working. All right, let me try this. I will quit out of the app completely. I'll go to share screen. I'll put you away. I'll double click on that and reopen it. Does that work?
That sounds good. And then if that doesn't work, if you want to.
Oh, I just did it, so it must
Okay.
not be working.
Okay. You could also try sending me your deck and then I could share it for you. If
Yeah,
it's
I
not
don't.
too big.
Okay. There it is. This has happened before. It doesn't. So does that work
Oh.
now?
Yep, we can see it now.
Yeah, I don't know why it does that. Honestly, it's very frustrating. You'd think as many times as everybody uses the software every day that it would work better than that. But all right, so pardon us for that. We'll make up for the time. So the assignment I was given was this question. Problem statement. So Crested Butte streets are already safer than those in most towns, which is true, and we'll see some data on that. So, but how can we make them safer? So it's sort of like you're already sort of in some ways a gold standard, but you aspire to more. So that was my assignment, and I want to start by talking about two related but not identical topics: safety and comfort. Because I think where you are in this conversation in Crested Butte, this is going to be sort of a shift you need to take. In traffic safety, transportation safety, we use this crash typology, and we're going to use it a little bit today, so I'll take a second to explain it. We classify crashes as property damage only, crashes that involve some personal injury. Our newer reporting systems allow us to identify serious injuries versus just not serious injuries, and then fatal crashes and fatalities, realizing that you can have a fatal crash that has more than one fatality involved. So the data can be, it can turn out to be a lot of data. We have this by location, by time. We know a lot about the movement of the vehicles and so forth, but we won't go into all of that detail. Let me ask Mel, on your screen, are the things blocking the screen? Are you able to see the whole thing?
I can see the whole thing.
Okay, all right, so it's only my screen that's doing it. All right, so here's those three categories too. And there's one more that we use in our work and that I recommend you use in this transportation planning process, which is close calls. And they're different. This is not official. It's not part of any reporting system, so you have to generate this data yourselves. People are pretty good at doing this, especially kids. You can do close calls mapping. But the important thing to know is that, especially with pedestrians, you can go years and years and years without a pedestrian being hit, injured and killed. And you think, well, that's fine. But then when somebody is, it's a big deal. And so the close calls are really important because they help you identify some of that potential. Close calls predict property damage only and injuries and fatalities. And as you work your way up, each level of severity is a good predictor of the next. So it's important to be familiar with that data and to use it in actual planning and design decision-making. Probably everybody in the call understands that speed of the vehicles in the crash is a major determinant of the severity of the crash. Where higher speeds, even speeds you might see in cities and towns in Colorado, a high percentage of people, if struck as pedestrians, will die. Whereas down at the lower speeds we see in Crested Butte, perhaps only 10% of people will die. Now, 10% is not nothing. 10% is still pretty serious, and we'll talk more about all that. We have some market trends that are affecting our crash severity at the same time. We're getting taller, heavier vehicles that are more dangerous. Vehicles that used to flip you up over the hood now smash you, and then we have the hyper acceleration, especially with our new EVs. It'll go 0 to 60 in less than 3 seconds. So the data is changing every year as we see these new trends take on. The comfort concept is one that I've used for a long time. We use this, you've probably seen this phrase, 8 to 80. Comfort is intended to be inclusive of people who are able, ambulatory, and people who have physical and mental challenges, children, older people. So it's inclusive, it's accessibility for all, and it's comfort. And comfort is not carefree. I mean, comfort is carefree, and that's what we're looking for, but it's not careless. And you'll hear people sort of saying comfort, you know, our streets don't need to be comfortable. But it's important, I think, for where you want to go next in Crested Butte, to think about how can we provide an environment where people actually feel comfortable. It turns out that's not the same thing as saying an environment where they don't get killed. So if you take and develop kind of a hierarchy, and I've used this for a lot of years now, where you compare safety and comfort, and your safety hierarchy goes from no close calls, nothing happening, to no property damage, some close calls, to no injuries, but some property damage, accidents, crashes, to no fatalities, but some injuries, to fatalities. So it's getting more and more serious, and you want to be going the other way. And you can array comfort similarly, which is to say that you go from carefree, no stress, to some concern and stress, to stressful, to dangerous and stressful, to no way, right? The highway engineering establishment settles for this. That's pretty much where Vision Zero is targeted. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect if what you're talking about is comfort, because where you might want to be in comfort is up here. So it's a higher standard. And so you need to acknowledge that from the get-go if you want to make any progress. We're not talking about traditional Vision Zero. We're definitely not talking about traditional traffic engineering. We're talking about a place where people can be in the streets and feel relatively carefree. Again, not careless, but carefree, and have no stress from traffic. And we'll look at Crested Butte specifically. This is crash data that the town has collected. That's from the officer reports of crashes. It's good data. It's not perfect data. There are weaknesses in the data, but as you see, these are really small numbers. I'm used to, usually these would be thousands, okay? Or maybe in a bigger town or smaller city, they'd be hundreds. But so in Crested Butte, you've had 3 injuries in the past 4 years that were recorded. And interestingly, all 3 of those were collisions between bicyclists and drivers. And you've had a pretty small number of property damage crashes. So it's obviously the work you've done so far, keeping your streets narrow, your 15-mile-an-hour posted speed and so forth, has paid dividends. It's a pretty safe place to be. The safest, this is the best data I've shown in all of the safety presentations I've made in the last several years. The town has mapped this data, and a couple of things show up. One, a number, so you would expect this, of course, but the most common location for crashes is the state highway and county highway corridor through town, 6th and 135. Elk comes in second, as you would expect, again, although again, those are pretty low numbers for 4 years. And 4th Street comes in third, although again, those are very low numbers. So pretty much nothing there that seems surprising. The one surprising thing I did see in the data, and I'm going to guess you've all been talking about this for a long time, is the sheer volume of parking crashes in your town. It's amazing. It's by far dominates the data set. And I'm assuming it's this problem of people not being very good at parallel parking and not being very careful parking when there's traffic. So probably not terribly important for our conversation today. The town has also gathered data from an organization a company called Streetlight that allows them to see what the speeds are. This is from last summer. And I want to point out a couple of, well, the first thing I want to point out is that you're actually having a remarkable amount of success with your 50-mile-an-hour posted speed limit. This is frankly amazing. I can't think of another place outside of Europe where this is happening. So you've done really well. There are a couple of things to notice. One is that I would call both of them transitions. One, so this is 135 coming into town from the south. I've zoomed in on that part of the map. And as you see, even though the 25-mile-an-hour sign is about right here, it's taking us a little while to slow down coming into town, including as we get through this very important intersection with the school traffic. So that transition is not exactly working the way you want to. People are seeing the 25-mile-an-hour sign, and about a quarter mile later, they might finally get down to 25 miles an hour. The other transition that I'm seeing is on your intersections off the state highway and county highway. You see this 27, 26, 20, 24. People are coming off the highway and turning the corner and then kind of starting to slow down. So, and we saw in the crash data, we saw all of these are crash locations. So these are all things that we probably want to think about. I'm a big believer in safety programs that focus on where the crashes occur. The database programs are not general programs, they're not philosophical programs, they're data-driven programs. The other factor, of course, is traffic. I was interested to see this data. This is more streetlight data that the town has collected. I wrote a transportation plan for Crested Butte, Mount Crested Butte, Gunnison, and Gunnison County for the River Valley, the Upper Gunnison River Valley, back in 1999, and we did traffic forecasts, and I don't know, we were pretty close. So this is about the traffic that you're seeing. You're still just a bit below 10,000 vehicles per day in the summer at your Elk 6 intersection, which is what we forecast. What was that, 25 years ago? So that's pretty cool, but the traffic is going to grow, and as it does, this concern about comfort is going to get greater. Even though your crash severity may drop a little bit because people won't be going as fast because the streets are busy, you'll get more crashes, and pedestrians will face a wall of sheet metal across the street, making it very difficult to use your street. So traffic volume is another important variable, and over time you may have to think about, do we have too much traffic volume on some of our interior streets? All right, so what are Crested Butte's opportunities? In safety planning, we think about three principal forces, levers that we can grab onto: enforcement, design, and culture. Enforcement, unfortunately, in today's world, is probably the least effective of these. It's also the most expensive. We live in the US, we have a culture where we value independence and where we are not used to the heavy hand of law. And so it can be, giving people tickets for rolling through stop sign, giving people tickets for being 3 miles an hour over the speed limit, and other things that we might want to do can seem too heavy-handed. And so, and then there's just a sheer cost of providing the kind of saturation enforcement you would have to actually get where you're trying to go. So it's not the easiest way to go. I don't know that I'm going to suggest that, I think you have to think about this. I don't know that this is the right answer in Crested Butte, but for a lot of our clients right now, we're recommending moving into AVIS, the camera enforcement systems. They're highly effective. They're very low cost relative to the amount of enforcement you get. There are some advantages. There are advantages and disadvantages, but that may be a conversation for another day. But that's out there, and that's probably a better strategy than trying to add a bunch of people to your marshal staff. But moving into design, this is where I think a lot of Crested Butte's opportunities lie. But it maybe not, and some of you may not be happy with what I'm about to say, but if you look at this graph we saw earlier, and you look at where you are, you can see that there's not a big safety dividend to be had from moving down from 15 miles per hour to 10 miles per hour. It's hardly, probably given statistical characteristics of data, we probably couldn't even measure it. So I'm not saying that 10 miles an hour isn't an attractive goal, but I'm saying that in terms of crash data, it probably wouldn't move the needle much. So focusing back on safety and comfort, then I've identified 5 areas I want to just sort of introduce for your thinking. And for all of them, we have to keep in mind, and I know you do, but I'm just reminding myself to some degree that is very different up there by season. Shoulder season is quiet. Summer's busy, winter's busy. In the winter, the streets are very different than they are in the summer, and so forth. So your safety program and your comfort program, street comfort program, probably have to be tailored, and they have in the past in Crested Butte. They've been tailored for the seasons. All right, so looking at these gateways, so the thing I'm noticing, and this is something we noticed 25 years ago when we were working up there on your regional plan, is that maybe there's a need for more of a gateway feature coming in and out, coming into Crested Butte from the north and from the south. This sign today is not invisible, but probably 90% of drivers don't really notice it. And that road is awfully straight, so there's no gateway. There's no real gateway here. I've always liked to compare this with the entrance into Winter Park from the south on US 40, where they've put in this barrier median in the middle. This welcome is a little hard to see, but welcome to Crested Butte. I mean to Winter Park. They had to talk DOT into letting them have this hard thing right in the middle of the road, and you know, it had to be designed correctly. But I've always thought that something like that might be a potential benefit in Crested Butte. We do have a project that the county is pursuing up the hill to the southeast there at the Brush Creek intersection, where Slate River runs under. And that intersection project, which is you know, in the early going right now, we have a general concept for it. Currently, it appears it will propose a roundabout at this location, which will give us a nice safety feature and a way to slow traffic coming from the south on the way into Crested Butte. Eventually, if the road from here, the highway from here into town became a town facility, and that's another topic we won't have time to go into today, that would give you more opportunities, perhaps introduce other traffic calming measures there. But so slowing people down coming into town is I think an important objective. You'll see now why I don't have a firm that does sign design, because I don't have any skills, but this is my I'm proposing that we think about, what if you, rather than just nail a 25, and I realize it's got to be 25 now because it's still a state highway. You can't do 15 on this part of 6th yet. But so it says 15, but still that 25-mile-an-hour sign is not doing a whole lot, right? And I've often thought, what if there was something a little more in your face? What if there was something that really kind of said, hey, wait a second, you're in a different place here. Crested Butte is very different and very unique. It's not like some of the other towns that happen to be on state highways in Colorado. It's very different. Coming from the north, same thing. Instead of that almost invisible sign there that's underneath the green sign that you can't even read, it says 15 miles per hour. What if you were more in their face? What if there was something that said, this is a different place, you've got to slow down? I've done other versions of this that had an enforcement helicopter hovering over here, but you know, you get the idea. And maybe even after you turn the corner and out, just another reminder. And you know, you see a lot of this around the country, and there are versions of this that that would be right for you. Don't, obviously my design, that's not going to work, but you see the point I'm making. I think that you want people to go 15 miles an hour or slower. You need to give them notice that this is a place where we do that. The second sort of category of proposed changes is your intersections that I flagged with the state highway and county road there, which are crash locations, and where we are seeing speeds a little higher than we want to, especially once they turn the corner. And you kind of see, this is a photo of from Google Street View of the Bellevue corner, where you have your little sign out there. You're doing everything you can to try to make these crossings safe and create a safe environment. I'm a fan of these. This is from a client of ours, Bainbridge Island, Washington. This is next to the school. Right over here are the school campuses, a high school and a middle school, and there's an elementary school over this way. It's a tight roundabout. It's a low-speed roundabout. It doesn't have the full modern Dutch design for the bike and ped, but it's pretty good. And now that the bushes have grown up to a good height, the students no longer diagonal across the street through the roundabout. And so this has had a major beneficial effect on safety at this location. It's expensive. These are expensive. They do take a little bit of right of way, but they're highly effective at improving safety and slowing traffic down. So that's an idea that I'll just leave with you. Then this is 4th Street looking north. Remember, 4th Street was our third highest crash location. And there are these local street intersections, which is where the bulk of your other crashes are occurring, the ones that are not the parking crashes. And there are a number of those that are popping up in the crash data. And here, I'm a big fan of these. Not everybody is. And I know you've had an experience in Crested Butte with the planters in the middle of the street that people were crashing into and getting hurt. So maybe this isn't the right idea. This is Seattle. Seattle did, I don't know now. I think I used to say dozens, but I think it might be hundreds of these locations now, where they have installed these. This one, I think, is one of the ones that's been here since the early 90s. And these have been highly effective. And you know, you do have to plow, and plowing your streets is a concern, and there's snow storage and so forth. When you look at your street, you know, you have unique challenges in Crested Butte where you're doing the back of curb parking. And you end up with a street that's, you know, if there were parking on both sides, it would be a lot slower street, obviously. So the question of, could you slow things down at the intersections? Could you pinch the speeds a bit at the intersections is one that I would want you to think about some. Now, these are old photos. Like I say, I've been working up there 25 years, and these are scans of slides, I think, so they're pretty low quality. But you see, you know, so you've been doing this kind of thing for a long time, and I think it's been beneficial. It does, you know, it only works when there's not snow on the ground and so forth. But I think slowing things down at those intersections on your local streets would help with your traffic calming. The fourth category is this general category of street closures and events. And I know you've had a couple, what is it, about a 3-year-long process now since the pandemic hit with Elk Avenue, and your various iterations of keeping that calm and providing outdoor seating and so forth. In our work, we use this typology for street types ranging from ordinary streets up to a full pedestrian mall. Ordinary street, this is third. In Crested Butte, obviously. Pedestrian street, this is a pretty urban example. This is from Boulder, East Pearl and Boulder. Festival streets, where you close them down whenever you want to. And festival streets are not just streets you close down. They're streets where you have installed things infrastructure-wise to make them work for special events. This street has electric outlets up and down on the curbs. It has water. There are a number of places where you can get water, a water supply, city water supply. And over here off to the left, where there's a little area where we have the food trucks park, there's even a sanitary sewer in that. And the entire thing is wired for sound too. So a festival street's more than just a street you close sometimes. And then Booner, in the West, I've had poor luck using foreign words to describe things. So you just say a shared street, don't have to use one of those silly Dutch words. So shared street, but this is Bell Street in Seattle. That's sort of like the next step where you actually have made design changes that prioritize pedestrians and bicyclists. Actually the sidewalk, there is no sidewalk. It's just the sidewalk and the street are at the same grade and so forth. This is obviously a more significant investment, and then a full pedestrian mall. And I could do a whole 2-hour show just on when do pedestrian malls work and when don't they. But it's important to remember most pedestrian malls fail, so we have to be very careful about when we try to use those. And then the fifth strategy that I want that I think you should think about is monitoring and reporting. Good transportation programs rely on incremental progress, not big plans are the enemy of progress. Big plans are dangerous. Big plans draw opposition. Small incremental steps and reporting and celebrating your success is the way to go. So crash data, system data, traffic volume, how many tickets are we issuing and so forth. Because it's very difficult to have a useful policy debate if you're still debating the facts. If you can get to a point where we've got a set of facts, so whether you do a dashboard or whether you do an annual report card or a 6-month report card, or maybe you just send data, you have the newspaper do a little classified ad 4 times a year where you post the data, but keeping the facts in front of the public, because otherwise people will make up their own facts, as you know. And then finally, culture, probably our most powerful tool, especially in a place like Crested Butte. Every community has its own unique culture. I took this photo back 25 years ago, and I think it captures the Crested Butte culture pretty well. a couple of townies and people talking and the planters and so forth. I think that's one of your hugest assets. Social capital is an incredibly valuable asset. We've lost it in many of our towns and cities. I think it's very low, at a very low level today in Denver, where I live, but I think it's still pretty high in Crested Butte, and that's this sort of we, right? We in Crested Butte. This is who we are. This is how we do things. We are now. This is maybe a little over the top. Not all of you go out and ice climb, for example, but I mean, this is who we are. And this is what we do. And that's really important, because in Crested Butte, you have two populations most days. You have the people who live and work there, and you have the visitors. Visitors need to know how you do things in Crested Butte. I've done a lot of work in resort communities over the years, and I can tell you that one of the first things people want when they come into a community like Crested Butte is they want to seem like they're a local. They want to be, you see people with carabiners hanging off their fanny packs, right? So they want to be like you. They want to be part of the place. They don't want to be a tourist. So if they know that in Crested Butte, we don't speed, in Crested Butte, we walk and bike, then that will have an influence on how they behave, because they don't want to seem like they're from the outside. So those are some ideas to kind of get you thinking about this question of how can we make even more progress than we've already made. The bottom line is, I think enforcement is not the most important strategy. You need enforcement and you will have it, but I don't think that's the first direction to go. I think there is a certain amount of design you could do that, and I tried to show things that would be relatively low cost and not big budget items. And then I think relying on your culture and making sure that we talk with each other. This is the kind of place we are. This is what we're trying to do, and communicate that with our visitors. Those will all be the most effective things you can do. And with that, I've used my 25 minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim. We so appreciate your presentation and expertise. We have some questions lined up already in the Q&A, and I'm going to go ahead and reshare my screen to show those.
I'll stop share here.
Perfect. And then that way you can also see that Menti code at the top as well if you'd like to pop a question in there. And you can also hit the raise hand button on your Zoom if you'd like to speak out with a question. But let's go ahead with the questions that are in here already. So Jim, if you don't mind going back to your ideas around signage, is there any data that show that signage with speed limit information on it can make any difference?
Yeah, yes, there is. And you have to go to special studies. It's not something that's in the basic crash reporting systems. When you go through the crash reporting system, you won't find a column where it says sign regime, but yeah, where people have done studies where they've implemented something and then studied before and after. Signs are effective if they're seen, and the problem we have, and Troy and town staff understand this very well, is that we have a national code, the manual on uniform traffic control devices, which tells us what kind of signs we can use that are regulatory signs. But once you get a little further away from the street and are going with informative signs, you can do pretty much anything you want to do. There's still some limits. So yes, signs can have an effect. As far as the center of flower, I don't know that you're going to go back to the planters in the middle of the intersections. Maybe you're looking at the little mini roundabouts I showed. Your question is actually the answer. The reason those work is because there's not enough space for everybody to cram through there at the same time. So everybody has to slow down, people have to yield, and that's the idea. Denver is experimenting with this right now. We have a number of these just north of me here. I live in Highland Square, and 3 blocks to the north is one of the Denver bikeways, east-west bikeways, 35th Avenue, West 35th. And they've been installing these mini roundabout traffic circles really in the middle in the middle and collecting before and after data. And in the initial going, they found that people were, demonstrating their driving technique by going through them as fast as possible. So they had to make them even bigger so that you really couldn't do that. So the early data didn't show that much difference in speed. It showed, if you do this, you measure it in the speed, not at the traffic circle, because obviously it's going to be low there. You measure it in the mid block to see what effect it's having. In the early going, they were not seeing a reduction in the traffic speeds from the traffic circles, but when they made them a little larger and the people got used to them, we are now seeing some pretty significant results. I bike on, that's one of the main streets I use to get to grocery stores and to do my longer rides. And I would say the safety is dramatically better than it used to be. In terms of mode shift, which is how I would describe this concept in the third box here to the right, in this country, no, not so much. We haven't had much success with mode shift yet. There are the college towns, Eugene, Boulder, where we have seen some mode shifts away from driving. We did a travel behavior survey in Crested Butte back in 1998 or 89. That data may still be laying around somewhere, I don't know. It's a good thing to talk about and to think about, and it's going to be more important in the future as you reach a point where there's just so many cars that you have to deal with the question of, can we maybe find a way to have fewer cars in Crested Butte? I've had this conversation with Troy, and this is a 25-year-old conversation, but as far as what is the magic is making it feasible to do what they need to do in a day's time without having to drive. It's, you can't lecture people out of their cars. Finger wagging doesn't work. If it's feasible not to drive, people will choose not to drive. As far as can you have safe streets for walking without sidewalks? I would say the answer is unequivocally yes. But I do feel like, with your 26-foot wide streets, you're sort of out there where, you may not be having all the success you might want to have. And I do think you want to slow. I would not think Crested Butte should try to install sidewalks on all your local streets. I really think that's is going to be too expensive. It's too many people are going to oppose it, and when you're all done, you still have your street crossings, and you just concentrate your issues at your street crossings. So I think that I think you're fine without sidewalks on those on your local streets, but I do think you want to slow traffic down. There are many European communities. I'm sure a lot of people in this phone call have been in those communities, and there are some in communities in northeastern United States and other places, Alaska, where there are no sidewalks. And yes, that can work. That can totally work. Marginal enforcement, bicycle laws, and citizen. As a bicyclist, I always chafe at this a little bit. When you do see data on bicycle behavior, you see that compliance by bicyclists of traffic laws is an order of magnitude higher than it is on the part of vehicle drivers. And even though people will say, well, the problem isn't the way drivers are driving, the problem is the bicyclists zoom through stop signs and so forth, and all the other things people complain about. I think I would not try to do this with enforcement. I think the idea of trying to enforce people into better, I always think, I don't know how many people in this call may have ever been to Amsterdam, have been in the central district in Amsterdam, where the bicycle traffic is really heavy, the pedestrian traffic is really heavy. And when you're first there, it's a little unnerving because you're walking around, these bicycles are zooming around, but the compliance with the laws and the understanding of this is how we do things in Amsterdam is very high. If you know what the rules are, you won't get run over. You won't get hit. Never. It won't happen. And so their crash rates are incredibly low. So I think I would lean more on culture for this. I wouldn't look to enforcement. Yeah, people who are jerks when they're driving are also jerks when they're riding their bikes. Okay, you don't turn into a nice person just because you got on a bike. So it can be a problem, and especially with our e-bikes, we get some things now going on where people are go faster. So I do think it's an appropriate topic. of concern. I do think your bike community probably can help you think about this and address it. I do think culture is the strongest thing. Using your culture and relying on that as a way to address this is probably the way to go.
Thanks,
Those are
Jim.
my opinions. You may not agree.
You're zooming through these questions and we have some great questions, so feel free to keep typing them in or hit that
Jim.
raise hand button.
Jim, this is Troy. If I missed it, I apologize. Did you address that, the parking crash question that's on the screen now to the left?
Oh, I didn't realize more questions. I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
No, it's all right.
No, well, I think, all right, so I would not, first of all, if people are running into each other parking, it's like, you know, I don't want to be insensitive, but to some degree, I don't care. You know, it's like, you know, you people need to do a better job of driving. And I think that to some degree, we're seeing with the camera systems and the AI system, the driver assistance systems coming in, we're seeing some reduction in this problem. But as far as angled parking versus parallel parking, that's an important subject. I wouldn't drive it with your parking crash data. I would drive it with the question of how much parking do we want and where do we want it, and how can we, if we want to take parking off a given street, could we replace it by going to angled parking somewhere else? So usually when we're talking about angled parking, diagonal versus parallel, we're primarily thinking about, do we want more parking or not? Where do we want it? And which of these, because we can get more, obviously, more parking spaces per block face with diagonal than we can with parallel. It's not as big a difference as you might think by the time you deal with some of the things you have to do, but that's how I would address that. Cultures. Well, yeah, I mean, if the culture is driving, then you're stuck with driving. Have been successful. No, well, I think, yeah, I think you're sort of there in terms of design features. I think that, and there's, as I showed, there might be more you could do. I think having this conversation you're going to have as part of this transportation plan over the next year is a big opportunity to have a conversation with people about, look, we all own cars. Most of us do. We all have to use them sometimes. Most of our tourists visitors are arriving here in cars. So we have to design for them. We can't just ignore them. And they have, they're going to, they're either going to park somewhere or they're going to do the Grand Canyon thing where they drive through town and go somewhere else. So I don't know that you can incentivize a car-free culture by any means other than having a place where you can do everything you need to do without driving. I don't own a car, and I don't brag about that. The reason I don't own a car is I don't need a car. If I want to drive to Crested, Butte, I rent a car, and that's cheap, way cheaper than owning a car. And I can get everywhere. I can walk. My dentist, my optometrist, everything I need is within walking distance. I have 4 grocery stores within a mile, which is an easy bike ride, even in the winter. So I think if you want to move away from, if you want to move towards more of a car-free environment in the US, you have to do it by making it possible for people to live without driving at least a significant amount of time. Now, there are European communities, and some of you are thinking about them, where there are, they're car-free places. You park at the edge of town, you take a shuttle into town. That has been talked about. Telluride does that during their music festivals, obviously, and so forth. So it's not an impossible idea, and maybe it's one you could debate to some degree as part of your transportation planning process.
As a follow-up, what are your thoughts on discouraging car use but addressing needs of those in wheelchairs or seniors who
I would start on the other end of that and say, how can we make every block face accessible for everybody? And then whatever space is left over, you can let the cars use. So I would be, now, I'm not sure if there's like a deeper question hiding in this one, like, are we talking about the streets where we don't have sidewalks or what? I don't, it's been a while since I've had the opportunity to spend like a whole day in Crested Butte and walk around and look at the, where are you with your ramps, your curb ramps and so forth. Usually our towns and cities have a lot more they need to do in that respect. They need to get the barriers out of the sidewalk. They need to have good curb ramps where the sidewalks come to the corners. They need to have better crosswalks and so forth. But I would say that providing accessibility for all is the highest priority always. And that's where you start. And in the space that's left over, we can talk about how we use that. Speed humps and dips. So you have some reverse drains on your north-south streets, probably, yeah. I think they're effective. People don't like them and will complain about them, but they are effective. They do slow traffic down, and where they exist naturally, you can kind of get away with them. I'm sure on these streets, if you have the reverse drains where the swale, the drain is actually, you know, a dip in the street, crossing the street, that you probably have gouges in the pavement on the far side of it where people have gone over too fast. I think it's an effective device. It's in other countries, it's used a lot. Anybody's been to Mexico, those aren't speed humps. Those are like, I don't know what you call them. They're like, you do not want to hit them any faster than about 5 miles an hour. You're going to need repairs on your car. But so in other nations, they're used a lot. We don't use them so much here, but they are effective. You know, your fire and emergency response people will have some concerns about them. So you'll need to, there are designs that work for the longer vehicles that need to move fast for emergency response. So I think it should be on the table. It's something you could think about. And in some locations, it might be a useful strategy. AVIS is, I was proposing, so I'm on the lower right box now. I was proposing AVIS for speed enforcement. You don't have traffic signals in Crested Butte, so obviously wouldn't be relevant for that. And I think the technology would support enforcement at stop signs, but you'd have to deal with the Colorado law. Colorado law currently doesn't call out AVIS, does not authorize AVIS for stop signs. It's only for traffic signals and speeding.
Jim, we had another question pop up, and you mentioned in your presentation how summer and winter are very different in Crested
Yeah.
Butte.
Yeah.
Does accessible for all include clearing of snow from sidewalks?
Damn straight it does, yes. And is one of my pet peeves, you know, and I've worked in Jackson for years on this, and they're finally making some progress. Don't tell me about your universal accessibility if I can't walk around town in the winter. And we're getting more challenging winters now. What's happening is we're getting more freeze thaw cycles than we used to have, and that's universal. Crested Butte doesn't have the same weather that Denver does, but in both Crested Butte and Denver, we're getting more freeze thaw cycles in a season than we used to. And that's really difficult because you're getting ice formation, you're getting glaciers on so on your east-west streets, you're getting glaciers in the curb line on the south side of the street because they're shaded. In the winter, from mid-December, really pretty much through the end of February, we don't get any solar gain on a lot of our streets, and we get a lot of shadowing on the south sides of east-west streets, and we're getting these glacier formations that can persist for months. And so, you know, don't tell me you've got great sidewalks if I can't get through the curb ramp because it's a glacier that I've got to cross. So yes, I think that, and I think that's a hard transition for everybody that I have as a client or have had recently, is realizing that we're going to have to deal with sidewalks and snow, and we're going to have to deal with street crossings and ice if we're going to truly provide an accessible setting. Now, you don't have to do everything all at once, but you should be talking about it and you should be making progress on it. So yes, I think it's important.
Jim, as a follow-up to that, we have, well, looks like this person had the same exact question I was going to follow up with, but we have a challenge on Elk Avenue where we have a patchwork of heated and non-heated sidewalks, which creates really rough transition zones. And are heated sidewalks the best, or what's your suggestion?
Well, it's not a strategy I would look for. I mean, in Crested Butte, where heated sidewalks make a difference is like if you have a hotel with a porte cochere and you want that to be, you know, that canopied area at the front of a hotel where you drive up, that's fine. You can do that. But the problem with melting water is the water has to go somewhere. And you don't have much of a drainage system in Crested Butte. You're still, you know, mainly surface drainage. So if you're melting water, it's got to go somewhere, and where are you going to take it? You know, so you end up, we studied this extensively for Breckenridge a few years ago. And in Breckenridge, you'd have to get the water down to the Blue River. And so we were looking at heated sidewalks on Main Street. And the problem was that we would have to heat the drain pipe all the way to the Blue River to make sure that that would actually work, and wouldn't just dam up and create big pools that would turn into ice. So, I mean, I'm not saying that you might not have a place or two where you want to do this. Or if you had a property owner that had a restaurant where people wait, you know, for seating out on the sidewalk, and you have a couple of those in Crested Butte. If they wanted to pay to go out and heat a sidewalk in front of, and it's just that one section of sidewalk where people stand, or that you're going to have a little plaza where people stand, you're going to heat that. I think that's fine. But as a general strategy for sidewalks in a mountain town, no, I don't think so.
Thank you for that insight, Jim. I will do a call for any last wrap-up questions before we end with next steps. Anyone want to raise their hand or throw anything in the chat?
Thank
One
you.
raised hand question from Kay Cook. So Kay, let's have you wrap this up with your last question.
I'm sorry, I don't see it.
She's gonna ask
Okay.
verbally.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to ask
okay.
in person. All right. So during high volume traffic days, we'll have a lot of people coming in from the south and a lot of people coming in from the north into town.
Right.
And do you ever encourage a police presence where you have four-way stops to keep the traffic flowing, or is that just encouraging easier traffic, but people are driving anyway? It's like the 4th of July or different times, the traffic will be backed all the way up to Washington Gulch and all the way to CB South. And if you had a police presence moving the traffic through, it seems like it might be smarter. Not all the time, but there are many times where it really looks bad for our community to have such backed up traffic, I think.
Well, I think that there is no good solution for backed up traffic in corridors like this, and I don't know what role law enforcement could actually play. On freeways, we can. So the capacity of a freeway at 70 miles per hour is actually a little bit less than the capacity of a freeway at 45 miles per hour. So on I-70, we can put patrol cars out there driving 45 miles per hour with their lights flashing, and will actually increase the capacity of the road. But on 135 and the county road through Crested Butte, I think your queues are going to be there. And the only real strategy, you know, you've got two choices for shortening your queues: having fewer people be there, or having people make less use of motor vehicles when they're there. So, you know, how do they get from hotel rooms to the town? My wife and I have stayed up in Crested Butte, and Mount Crested Butte rather, in a hotel, and come down into town a few times over the years. How can you make that so that we wouldn't even think of getting our car out of the garage and doing that? What about trips between the communities in the valley, CB South and so forth? I think that I'm not smart enough to see this future. Every time I try to predict traffic in a mountain town, it does something I didn't expect it to do. So I'm not going to go there, but a very likely future is that your traffic would be even higher in the future than it is now. There's really, I'm sorry to say, not a whole lot you can do about that. Estes Park has had this conversation for years. You think your queues are bad, you should see their queues. You think at some point it would get so bad that people wouldn't go there anymore, but it doesn't work that way. So I think eventually, you know, some intercept parking, and I know not everybody likes this idea, you know, using your transit services to really make the percentage of trips by transit higher and the percentage of trips by car lower. And you do still have a certain amount of single occupant vehicle, SOV, you know, driver only vehicles, trying to reduce the amount of that And you can do some of that through some parking enforcement and some other things. But no, I don't see a role for law enforcement in making the queues go away. I don't think that's possible, honestly. Sorry to say.
Thank you. And I want to say that I think those signs, those big signs coming into town are a brilliant idea.
Okay, well, hopefully you can get somebody who does better sign design than I do.
I like your sign design. It was easy to see.
Okay.
So, well, thank you, Kay, for the wrap-up question, and thank you so much, Jim. We just so appreciate having you on here. And as a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be posted on the Transportation Plan website. So please spread the word with your friends, and please stay tuned for these upcoming opportunities. We have 3 more webinars to go. If you haven't registered already, some more great speakers coming up these next few weeks. If you've not taken the mobility survey yet, please do spread the word, tell your family, tell your kids, tell your friends to take the survey. And then lastly, tomorrow afternoon, we are hosting a winter walking audit. It's going to be really interesting weather and experiences. So please join us, email transportation@crestedbutte-co.gov. If you'd like to sign up and join us, we'll be meeting outside town hall tomorrow at 3 o'clock and talking through our different experiences, walking through different parts of town. So that is it. Feel free to reach out or check out the Transportation Plan website for other upcoming opportunities and questions or feedback. And thank you so much for joining us today. And let's give a big hand in our virtual boxes for Jim. Thank you,
Thank
Jim.
you.
Yay.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.